You know that cold, sudden drop in your stomach?
Oh yeah, it is absolute panic.
Right, like it's a Tuesday morning, everything seems completely normal, and then boom, you get a calendar invite for a mandatory 15-minute sync.
With your manager and an HR rep you've literally never met.
Exactly. Or maybe you go to log into your email and your password just doesn't work anymore. Suddenly the reality you woke up in is just gone.
It is entirely destabilizing. I mean,
Yeah.
the professional ground just vanishes beneath your feet in a matter of seconds.
So today we are dismantling the actual mechanics of the corporate layoff. We're going to look at the internal scripts companies use to let you go, the biological panic your body enters when it happens, and, well, the mathematical formula for getting your leverage back.
And we are pulling from a really rich stack of sources for this deep dive. We've got clinical psychology research, human resources strategy guides, financial frameworks, and some pretty raw firsthand accounts from industry veterans.
Now, before we get into the weeds here, I want to be super clear for you, the listener. We're looking at this strictly through the lens of the psychological and strategic sources we have. We aren't taking any sort of ideological stance on corporate practices or workers' rights.
Right, that's a vital baseline. We just
Yeah.
want to unpack how these systems operate and how the experts say you can actually navigate them.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly grasp the emotional fallout of a layoff, you really have to understand the incredibly clinical way companies execute them. Like when it happens to you, it feels like a deeply personal rejection.
Oh, absolutely. But behind closed doors, it operates on a completely different logic. Dr. K from Healthy Gamer GG calls this the corporate constructed reality.
Constructed reality. Tell me more about that.
Well, as employees, we naturally assume that a layoff involves, a deep evaluation of our performance. We think they looked at our 360-degree reviews and our inherent value to the team.
Yeah, we assume they looked at our specific contributions and just made a judgment call that we weren't good enough.
Exactly. But the data shows that almost never happens. The decision is primarily macroeconomic. Someone at the executive level looks at an operating budget and tells finance they need to cut, say, 20% of costs to hit a quarterly target.
So it literally just starts as pure math.
Pure math.
Yeah.
Finance then tells HR to meet that quota. And HR just applies a standardized, honestly somewhat arbitrary rubric to reach the number.
Right.
They might eliminate an entire research and development department simply because the company can't afford the runway for those projects right now. It has nothing to do with the talent of the individuals in that room.
But it feels like being cut from a sports team because you aren't good enough to play. You walk out feeling like a failure.
I'd actually push back on that analogy slightly.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, in sports, you are usually cut because of a direct performance metric. A much better way to look at a layoff, based on Dr. K's framework, is that the team owner just decided to bulldoze the entire stadium to build a parking lot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it has absolutely zero to do with how fast you can run. They just couldn't afford the stadium anymore.
That is a much better way to frame it. But because upper management is making decisions based purely on math, the people forced to actually deliver the news, like the middle managers and HR reps, they are put in an impossible position.
And that disconnect is exactly why these announcements often turn into absolute psychological horror stories. The people delivering the news are rarely the ones who made the decision.
Which brings us to the actual announcement protocols. We looked at an HR partner guide and insights from the reboot script, and the communication failures are just staggering.
Yeah, they really are.
Middle managers are sometimes briefed just an hour before having to read this sterile script to a team they spent years building.
And the list of corporate don'ts in our source of is extensive. A primary failure is leaking the news. Information gets out on internal Slack channels before the official announcement.
Which instantly destroys trust across the entire organization.
Exactly. Then there's the reliance on corporate jargon. Imagine losing your livelihood, and the termination email says the company is restructuring to better align with our strategic vision.
It feels incredibly dismissive.
Companies often use that sterile language to protect themselves legally, but it completely strips the humanity from the interaction. We've even seen cases in the tech industry where hundreds of people are laid off simultaneously on a muted video call.
That is wild. Cameras off, no dialogue, just a broadcast. So what is the alternative? How do the HR strategy guides actually suggest companies handle this?
So the HR Partner Guide emphasizes honesty and human delivery. Managers should explain the macroeconomic reasons clearly. They need to provide immediate details about severance.
Right, don't leave people guessing about their paychecks.
Exactly. And critically, they should never frame a broad layoff as a purge of low performers. It damages future job prospects for the employees, and honestly, it's usually just a cover for poor financial planning.
So the company delivers the news, often poorly, as we've seen, and you are sitting there processing it. What actually happens to your brain and body in that exact moment?
Well, Days Ramsey highlights that this event sets off a literal terror alarm in your nervous system.
I really want to dig into that. Why does a basic calendar invite trigger a biological terror response?
Here is why, from an evolutionary standpoint, your brain equates your job with your tribe and your access to resources.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. So when you are abruptly cut off from that ecosystem,
Yeah.
your amygdala just floods your body with cortisol.
Yeah.
Your brain literally thinks you are going to starve in the wilderness.
So it's not an overreaction, it's a genuine survival mechanism kicking in.
Yes, the data shows that the bodily response to losing your job closely mimics the clinical grief of losing a loved one. You aren't being weak. Your body is registering a catastrophic threat.
And the mental spiral follows immediately. Chetan Mahajan detailed this in his TEDx talk. I mean, he had a Kellogg MBA and 16 years of experience. Yet, when he was laid off, his immediate reaction was just overwhelming shame and victimhood.
He asked himself why it happened to him, despite working so hard. That is the cognitive dissonance of the constructed reality we discussed earlier.
Right, the existential anxiety of, how do I pay rent? It just takes over completely. But what really caught my attention was Dr. K's research on self-esteem.
Oh, this part is fascinating. It's a total paradox.
Yeah.
You would assume your self-esteem drops because you feel you lacked competence in your role. But the data shows an employee's drop in self-esteem is directly correlated to the manner of the firing, not their actual performance.
Wait, so the actual mechanics of the HR process dictate your internal confidence?
Precisely. If a company fires you via a disorganized, heartless email or a muted Zoom call, it is an objective sign that the company is poorly managed. Yet, human beings tend to internalize that.
We assume the large corporate entity must be acting rationally, so we must be the broken variable.
Yes. Because of the lack of warm explanatory communication, you internalize their disorganization as your own worthlessness.
Wow.
Paradoxically, if you are laid off with a clear explanation of the financial realities and a warm send-off, your self-esteem remains largely intact.
So knowing that we internalize the company's bad behavior, how do we actually stop that mental spiral? Because the urge to panic and try to fix the situation immediately is overwhelming.
This moves us into immediate damage control. And the overwhelming consensus from the experts across our sources is to institute a strict 48-hour buffer.
Yeah, the advice from the reboot script was very clear on this. Give yourself 48 hours to just grieve the loss. Do not rush into action.
It feels very countercultural, especially in industries that glorify hustle culture. But jumping straight into productive mode while your amygdala is still firing that terror alarm is a dangerous trap.
I think of it like going grocery shopping when you're starving and simultaneously having a panic attack.
That is a great way to put it.
You are going to make terrible choices. You'll grab whatever is right in front of you just to feel full. You absolutely have to stabilize your nervous system first.
That is exactly what happens with frantic networking. Dr. K notes that if you start applying for 50 jobs on LinkedIn while feeling worthless, you will inevitably project that desperation onto recruiters and hiring managers.
Okay, so assuming you take those 48 hours to decompress, what are the actual logistical steps to take once the nervous system settles down a bit?
Well, financial expert Vivian from Your Rich BFF offers a highly tactical piece of advice here. You need to ask HR for a layoff letter.
Let's break down the mechanics of that. What exactly is a layoff letter?
It is a formal document on company letterhead explicitly stating that your termination was due to corporate factors, like a reorganization or budget cuts, and was not performance-related.
Ah, that's incredibly useful.
It is. Having this document completely neutralizes any stigma when you are speaking to future employers.
She also suggests securing a letter of recommendation from your manager right then and there before they, move on to other projects or leave the company themselves.
Next, you have to audit your severance package. Vivian provides some really helpful industry benchmarks in her material. In the tech sector, a standard baseline is roughly 4 weeks of severance per year of service.
And in other sectors.
In major banking, for instance, it might range from 6 to 12 months. You need to sit down and calculate your exact financial runway.
Mental health expert Dr. Cheryl Ziegler adds another crucial layer to this early stage. Control what you can control, but do not stress spend.
The psychological urge to cope by purchasing things is immense right after a shock like this.
People buy things to regain a feeling of control.
Exactly. But it is the fastest way to destroy the very runway you just calculated.
Okay, so if we step back from the immediate panic for a second, once those logistics are handled, you are left staring at a massive, open-ended void. Your daily routine is just gone.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this void is actually the pivot point. It is about reframing the job loss from a crisis into a moment of intentional friction.
It is a chance to stop drifting on corporate autopilot. We actually found a deeply poignant story reflecting this from a YouTube channel called Asian Dad Energy.
Yeah, his story was powerful. He was a 25-year veteran of the tech industry, pulling in a massive salary and hitting all the expected milestones.
But he realized he was working relentless hours, missing his son's teenage years, and ultimately solving problems he just didn't care about.
The turning point for him was genuinely chilling. He worked with a brilliant colleague named Jay. They were pulling late nights for a major project right before the holidays, and Jay suffered a heart issue, went to the hospital, and passed away.
Just awful. And the company held a brief moment of silence, sure, but within a month, it was as if Jay had never existed.
The operational machine just kept moving forward without him.
That realization of disposability completely changed his perspective. When the next round of layoffs was announced, he actually volunteered to be put on the list so a junior colleague could keep their job. He intentionally stepped off the treadmill.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but also, a bit tricky. When we talk about stepping off the treadmill or finding your true passion, is it just toxic positivity to tell someone who can't pay the rent that getting fired is a blessing in disguise?
I think we have to be very careful with that narrative. A layoff is a systemic shock that genuinely hurts people financially and emotionally.
It is not about toxic cliches like everything happens for a reason. What we were actually discussing here is agency. It is the deliberate shift from being a victim of a corporate spreadsheet to becoming the author of your next steps.
We saw a perfect example of this agency from a caller on The Ramsey Show. He was an analytics consultant who found out he was scheduled to be laid off in a few months, but he was receiving a substantial severance package.
And Dave Ramsey told him it was the best possible time to get laid off.
Right. Why?
Because the caller's skills were in high demand. Ramsey reframed the entire severance package. It wasn't a desperate lifeline. It was essentially a signing bonus for his next better opportunity.
Ramsey emphasized that true security doesn't come from a fragile corporate entity. Your security is your own skill set.
The corporation is just a temporary vessel where you apply those skills. When you recognize that, losing the job doesn't equate to losing your inherent value.
Which brings us to how you actually rebuild that value. Alec Fisher's TEDx talk provides a great roadmap for this. He was fired from a marketing job, had zero savings, and suffered daily panic attacks. Every single job rejection felt like a confirmation that he wasn't good enough.
But he actively broke that cycle by doing a highly specific life audit. He checked out a book from the library called The Firestarter Sessions.
Wait, how exactly did he do that audit? Because it wasn't just making a pros and cons list, right?
No, not at all. He mapped out the specific moments in his life where he felt truly engaged. He looked for the exact intersections where his passion met a tangible purpose.
Okay.
He analyzed the tasks that put him into a state of flow, completely separate from his previous job titles.
And he realized he had spent his entire career working for companies that didn't align with those moments of flow. So he essentially hired himself. He started his own media company, went to therapy to process the trauma of the layoff, and actively cut out the naysayers telling him to be realistic.
That leads to a critical mechanism for the job hunt itself. Chetan Mahajan calls it the resume box. After his layoff, Chetan realized he was frantically trying to force himself back into the exact same corporate box that had just ejected him.
Great, because that feels like the safest, most logical route.
But Chetan realized that spending 8 hours a day clicking Easy Apply on LinkedIn actually degraded his mental health. It made him desperate, which in turn made him interview poorly.
So how did he actually fix his routine?
He implemented a strict ratio. He kept his job hunting to just 2 hours a day of deep, highly targeted networking. And then he forced himself to spend the other 6 hours of his day on hobbies, exercise, and activities completely unrelated to his career.
Wow.
Yeah, he used that time to rebuild his identity outside of the resume box.
That is such a powerful counterintuitive strategy. Treat the job search as focused, deep work, not an 8-hour panic spiral.
Exactly. You have to actively schedule sleep and recovery. If you project the shame of the layoff, you're going to encounter closed doors. If you project the rebuild value of your skills, you find new paths.
Let's summarize the framework we've mapped out from all these sources. First, you have to recognize the corporate machine for what it is. It operates on a constructed reality of macroeconomic spreadsheets. It is not a reflection of your human worth.
Second, you must allow yourself to grieve. Respect the biological terror alarm and take that 48-hour buffer before making any moves.
Third, manage the immediate logistics methodically. Secure your layoff letter to neutralize the stigma, calculate your severance runway, and absolutely freeze any stress spending.
And finally, utilize the friction of the layoff. Do the life audit, restrict your frantic job board scrolling to 2 hours of deep work, and step out of the resume box to build a routine that serves your actual skills.
I think the most vital takeaway goes back to Dr. K's research. If your company let you go in a disorganized, cold, or cruel way, that is a direct reflection of their operational incompetence. It is not a reflection of you.
Your value does not vanish into thin air just because an organizational chart was redrawn in a boardroom you weren't invited to. Your intelligence and humanity remain entirely intact.
So what does this all mean for you? It brings us right back to that terrifying moment the corporate badge stops working. We spend so much of our lives introducing ourselves at parties by proudly stating our job titles. We wrap our entire identities in the logos of the companies paying us. But if all the companies in the world disappeared tomorrow and you couldn't use your job title anymore, how would you introduce yourself? Who are you really when you aren't on the clock?